I'm back with Debbie, and when we left off, Debbie was talking about the fact that we need to communicate better. We need to communicate better to South Americans and Venezuelans for sure, but we need to communicate better to Mexican Americans, and we need to communicate better to the American people. So I think one thing it's fair to say is that in the midterms, Republicans ran in the expectation that essentially pointing to the failures of Biden was sufficient. Hey, look at crime. Hey, look at the border. Hey, look at what you're paying for gas. And the idea was, he's a bad guy. We're not going to say anything about ourselves. We're not Biden. That's our stance. And this was the Republican kind of message going into the midterms. Sure, Kevin McCarthy put out a commitment to America, but that was after he did that, it was almost like it was a one-day event. No one talked about it ever since. And so Republicans presented themselves really just as nothing more than the opposite of Biden. But it looks like as we go toward 2024, we're going to have a different approach. But honey, let's talk a little bit about the, you mentioned the Venezuelans and the Cubans, but of course in Texas, we deal more with Mexican Americans. Your mom is Mexican American. Let's talk about some of the South Texas races, because I think that Republicans overall appear to have gotten 38 to 40% of the Hispanic vote overall. And that's huge, because that bodes very well for Florida, for Texas. It actually begins to shift the politics of California if it stretches over there. Let's talk about, we were disappointed, of course, that Mayra Flores lost. There was a kind of troika, Mayra Flores, Cassie Garcia, Monica de la Cruz. But we didn't lose all three of those races.
Yes. No, Monica de la Cruz, she won her race, 80,000 votes versus 67,000 votes for Michelle Vallejo, the Democrat. So she definitely made some headway there, and very, very happy about that. But with Mayra Flores, I think we should encourage Mayra to maybe run again in 24, because she really only came within 10,000 votes of Vicente Gonzalez. And that is huge in the Valley. What people don't understand is that in the Valley, the Democrats have been an institution for over 150 years. So the fact that Republicans are even competitive as they have been, is huge. Obviously, we still need to, get it over the top. And again, I think it comes to education, because we have to make the case that faith, family, and freedom are the three things that Republicans can bring to the table in the Valley. As you know, every time we go to the Valley, I grew up in the Valley from the age of 10. And I saw the poorness of the Valley. When I came from Venezuela, I went to the Valley and I thought that I had entered a third world country. Well, at the age of 56, going back to the Valley, it still looks like a third world country. So we've got to educate the people in the Valley and let them know that, there is a better system down here. You do not have to keep voting Democrat just because your dad, your grandpa, his grandpa voted Democrat. You don't have to do it. You can break away from the Democratic Party. And I was also very happy to see that a Republican won a state seat in the House, a state, Texas state seat in the House. Janie Lopez, she beat the Democrat by quite a bit. She got 69% of the vote versus 30% of the vote, which is huge. So the Valley, I want to say that it may not have been a red tsunami, but it was definitely a little bit of a red wave down there, because again, Mayra didn't lose by that much. And so there is hope. Again, I think that just educating the people in the Valley about what they're voting for and why they should vote Republican is a really important thing. And I think we need to make sure that in the next 2 years, that is our mantra, honey.
These changes don't occur in one election or even in 2 election cycles. If you look at large changes in American politics, let's look, for example, at blacks who used to vote for the Republican Party in the era of Lincoln all the way till the New Deal. Blacks began to move over, but it took about 3 elections before they were solidly in the Democratic camp. Now, the Depression, of course, was the accelerator of that event. when you and I would talk to Ray Gonzalez, who was the previous candidate running as a Republican, basically Ray was running 40-60. So the Democrat would beat him without campaigning by 20 points. And that gives you the complexion of what the Valley is really like and what Myra was up against. She was in a Biden plus 14 or 15 district, and she still comes really close. And that tells me that this is sort of like one of those, it's a wave that's gathering strength, and what we want to do is nourish it. Look, if the Republican Party is the party of the working class, if it's the party of increasingly of black men, if it's the party of Hispanics, there's a solid majority there. Also, Republican ideas and conservative ideas of upward mobility, economic opportunity, a strong and yet prudent foreign policy, maintaining law and order, standing up for cultural decency and against woke craziness. This is not a losing agenda, but it's an agenda that has to be articulately presented. It has to come with a policy agenda. These are the things that we're actually going to do. And so while, yes, last night was discouraging, not what we had hoped for sure, not the red wave that we would have been celebrating. Nevertheless, it's a cautionary note. It means we got to think harder. We need to work smarter, and long term, we're going to be okay.